Hey YouTube, Audio Damage has impressed the hell out of me this year by deciding they're going to get into iOS, so they're bringing all of their goodies to iOS. And one of those goodies is Quanta, which is a granular synthesizer, and I'm including it in part of my look at the granular synthesizers of 2018, and this one is going to be a treat because it is deep. It is super complex. This used to be a full-fledged desktop VST AU, and now it is a full-fledged iOS AU, and we can play with it exactly the way that we would play with the desktop version. I'm going to get into the granular stuff, but first I want to show you some of the synthesis elements because I think this is going to be a really good demonstration here with the oscilloscope. So I'm turning off the filters. So you look at the oscilloscope, and well, I'm kind of deafening myself here. All right. You can like really see this very clean wave that you can shape to whatever you want. And this is the synthesis oscillator section, right? And then we've got noise. Also mix in. And color. All kinds of weirdness with that. And then we've got a couple of different filters that we can play with. Either serial, which is the usual way that filters are done in most iOS, at least, synth apps, where if we turn on two of these filters, now we're going to have one running into the other. So the first one, if they're both basically the same, you're hearing basically the same result. But if we move one, now one is filtering down and we're not hearing very much of this one. We can kind of peak it by pushing up the resonance of the second one. But we've also got the option of doing parallel, which gives us two entirely separate filter paths. So now we can make one really pump up that noise and another one to bring in the wind sound. So that's a lot of fun. I wanted to show you all of the synthesis stuff before we get into the granular stuff because it's going to get really hectic there. One other thing I wanted to show off was we've got, once again, I'm turning off the filters. We've got the ability to do pulse width modulation. Let me turn off the noise because that's not going to be helpful for this. Give us a regular square. All right, so that looks like basically a square. And we can... Let me shape down the level a little bit. We can change the pulse width, which is like a really, really good demonstration of what pulse width modulation means. We are changing the duty cycle. How much is the on and how much is the off? And we can change that in the matrix. We can say, okay, let's take, we'll take, let me find this. There's a lot of stuff in here. Oscillator... Pulse width. Okay, I already had it selected. And we'll say, let's use the LFO to change that. So now, the first LFO is doing that to our pulse width. And we can change the frequency that it's doing that. Which looks really crazy on that oscilloscope. So that's like the real basic building blocks of synthesis. You've got them in here where you can just create a whole bunch of new and wild sounds using just the synthesis without even getting into the granular stuff. But now we're getting into the granular stuff where we can take all of the synthesis stuff and instead of listening to it like this, we can mix it in over here. So now what we're hearing is grains taking like... Okay, let me rephrase this. We're hearing little slices of the synthesized audio as grains, and we can shape that in all the ways that we would do that with the, usually in granular synthesis, you'd use a sampler or something. So for this, we can say, we want a whole bunch of grains of this length. And the shape here, well, you can actually see the shape in the oscilloscope. That's cool. The shape is our, I forget exactly what they call it, but it's basically our amp envelope for each of these grains. So let me change it to something that looks a little more like a traditional amp envelope where we've got no attack, and a slope here of decay. Let me change the length so it's a little bit more obvious. All right, here. Let me reduce to 1. So we got, that's a very typical sort of on and off with a slope, which in an envelope generator would look, let me use a generator I'm not using, would look something like this maybe, where we're basically just having a like, that's basically what that would look like in an envelope generator, which, you know, makes sense. But now we've got all these other options in here. So we could actually make it go the other way, where it ramps up. Or this is kind of the default full on, full off. And it's really fascinating to me that you can see some of that in the oscilloscope. Like right now we've got this square, so it's squares and squares. And then this gives us kind of a fun swooshy. So let's take this now and add more grains to this. So they're all now doing that swooshy, swooshy, swooshy. And this length is, let me lower that to 100 because it's going to be, yeah, it's kind of annoying if we go too low. Yeah, that's just a clicking noise. But now we're getting 7.06 grains, which are lasting 103 milliseconds. And as we increase the length of these grains, they start to like overlap and do all kinds of interesting sonic things. God, I'm just endlessly fascinated by seeing this in the oscilloscope. So that's pretty cool, right? Like we've played with like 3 things, and we've got this completely original sound. Like nothing's making that kind of noise. And we can, I really do want to get into some of the samples and stuff like that, but I want to show you this in a way that's going to make sense, because if I start throwing in samples, I think that's going to make this confusing. So yeah, let me, I can show you some of this randomization. This is a lot of fun. Like we can change the amount of grains we have now. And that's done something with the stereo field, which is interesting. Like it's... I don't want to play with that length because it's perfect the way it is. And I guess we could change the tuning to be random. I'm not sure how position is going to be interpreted in the synthesis, so let's hear that. Doesn't sound like it is. That's more of a sample thing, but was worth trying. We could also do the same here now by mixing in the noise. And now noise is part of our granular samples. Or slices, I should say. Alright, I've shown you the synth stuff alone enough. So you can load in your own samples, but I imagine most of you guys watching this at home aren't even going to want to fuck with that. You're just going to be like, hey, what do I get out of this for the price I pay for it? So for that, you've got a ton of presets, including some from a lot of sound designers you've probably heard, like Richard Devine, and even Chris Carter from Throbbing Gristle, and he has a whole bunch of interesting stuff in here for you. Just lots of weird and sometimes even beautiful kind of sounds. That's really nice. And let's see, there's one in here that I wanted to screw around with, because you can take these now and use these samples, because you look at the current sample in the middle of the screen. As I change selection, Oh, well, this is entirely synthesis driven. We get an entirely new sample to play with as I change presets here. So you can find one of these that you like. Or once again, a nice example of just using the synthesis right here. And it's also using the parallel filter, so you can shape them. There was one of these that I really wanted to show you, and I can't find because there are a lot. Oh, damn. This is another example of how, although granular tends to be very weird and kind of glitchy, it can also be quite beautiful. And here you see that this sound designer, Joseph, oh shit, I just changed, oh, okay, it was next door. Joseph, not gonna try, has got a huge length on this, which is blending all 24 of these grains. So for just demonstration purposes, I want to try to glitch this out. And you hear it, but switching to this, like that's step one to glitch out any of these is to change the grains shape to this square. Because now instead of having those smooth slopes, it's giving us this like really hard on off. It's like if you had a synthesizer with absolute zero attack, or it's just click, 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 click. Oh, you know what? There's also a cool visualization of this. Well, it's not particularly cool on this one. You can usually see this jumping around all over the place. Changing the position randomly. So that is basically achieving what I was going for, where it was pretty and glitchy. Let me switch now to something else. Richard Devine's always got a lot of like great textures. Drifting Sun sounds cool. Yes. It is. And here we've got an example of using just a little bit of the oscillator mixed in here. I'm sure he's got some... well, let's take a look at the matrix here. You can... Like, there are so many things in here. There's a scroll bar. You can assign the... sample and hold, the 2 LFOs, or the 4 envelopes to a whole bunch of different things. And if you use a Aftertouch keyboard, you've got even more options here. And actually, yeah, okay, so that would be AT, and then you've got, you know, bend and stuff like that as well. I'm just using this as a keyboard, trying to give you the example that I think most people are going to be playing with this as, is just, here it is loaded up on my iPad. Let's make cool noises. So that's a really, really beautiful sound. That's like very gentle and coming in and out. Trying to see if there's a example of or something in the mod matrix that's going to show me what he's using. So I think that this is the main thing that is creating this beautiful slope that we're hearing. Is just sitting the output level that we're hearing over, this output level over here is entirely controlled 100% by the first FEG, which is flexible envelope generator. If we reduce the release here, is that not the release that I just played with? Okay, so it's got a lot of different things going on, and you notice it scales. Like if you drag it closer and closer, it tries to scale to fit here. Oh, that's huge decay that I'm hearing. Okay. No. It is a little confusing to be jumping into other people's presets to show this off, and I am sorry if this has been hard to follow, but I wanted to show you that there are a lot of things in here that you can just immediately dig into and not have to worry about making your own textures and stuff to play around with. I did notice one thing here that I'm playing with the wrong envelope. That's probably my first problem. Okay, yeah, there we go. So slowly, like as I change the length here, and you can see you can see the numbers increase, and this scales to resize. So now we're up to a 3-second release, and you'll notice there are different modes here, so we can actually set it to this. Here, let me change the attack. That is really loud. So now it's cycling through here. Let me reduce that attack just a bit. That's getting kind of crazy with the extreme release. So I might be confusing things by calling these releases. They're their own individual breakpoints. So here we're looping back and forth, it sounds like, between these 2 points here. That creates kind of an interesting haunting gating sort of sound, because this is like, it's a pretty sound that we're hearing, but it's also being like ducked real hard, like aggressively. I honestly don't even know how to like further explore this in a video without this going on for an hour. There are, as I showed you, the LFOs and the huge matrix of options that you can try to assign things all over the place. I think when I finish doing this series of showing you guys all these granular synth apps, I'm going to do a video showing you how to make interesting textures for using in granular synth apps, which, now that I come to say it, should have probably been step 1 in this series. But here we are. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much to my Patreon patrons for making these videos possible. And thank you very much to Audio Damage, who are among the many new advertisers that have stepped up to keep Discord around now that Apple is no longer going to be paying the bills. So thank you very much to those guys as well. Take it easy, folks.